Hello everyone, today we are going to talk about Terraform. Terraform used for infrastructure provisioning in the cloud and on-premises. The challenge we face provisioning cloud resources is configuration drift. With the use of Terraform, we can provision resources to multiple environments with consistency and avoid configuration drift. I am Kasum Rajapaksha, Microsoft MVP and certified in multiple cloud platforms. From this tutorial, let's take a high-level look at creating Terraform and provisioning resources in the cloud. Now let's take a look at how we can install Terraform for your local machine. So to install Terraform, first you need to go to the Terraform download site, then we can download it from there. Let's Google search for Terraform download. So when you type Terraform download, you can from the first search results, you can go to the Terraform download link. So when you go to the Terraform download link, you can find different operating system downloads based on your usage, right? So for example, if you're using Mac OS, then you can use Brew package manager to download it, and Windows you can use executable, and Linux also there are different Linux distributions supported. So from here, you can download the relevant packages and install it for your machine. So in my environment, I already downloaded from Brave install in my Mac. So after you download, we'll see how we can create our first Terraform file and deploy it and see the outcome. Now we'll see how we can develop our Terraform file. So for this demo, I will show you how we can deploy a few resources into Microsoft Azure provider, right? So for this example, my target cloud platform is Microsoft Azure. So if you are familiar with AWS or any other cloud platform, you can try out with their own providers. But the language that we use for Terraform is similar. That means the configuration language we use for Terraform is similar in whatever the provider that you use. So in Terraform, we use HCL, HashiCorp configuration language, to define our infrastructure declaratively. So we define whatever the resource we need to deploy into our target cloud platform using declarative method. So in the declarative method, we define it as a code, and we specify what properties and configurations that we need to be deployed, and then we use Terraform executable to plan our plan our cloud resources, then apply it to our target cloud environment. So now let's see in example how we can create our first cloud resource in Microsoft Azure through Terraform. We usually, when you develop the Terraform, we usually create 3 files. So one file we call it as a main.tf and variable.tf and output.tf. But it's not mandatory to use all of these 3 files. You can define all of these 3 components in one single Terraform file. But for manageability and readability, we divide those Terraform configuration into those 3 files. So now I will create those 3 files in my environment. So I will create a file called main.tf. Then I'll create another file, variable.tf. Then another file for output.tf. Okay. So we created 3 files for our configurations. So we discuss what are these each file we use, right? So in usually when you are developing Terraform files, in the main.tf file can be used for your resource declaration, right? Then there are no mandatory mentioning that this file should be main.tf. It can be any other name, but for a easier purpose, I name it as main.tf. So whatever the resources that we are going to deploy will define in declarative language, Terraform language will be configured in this main.tf. Then the output.tf file will be used for outputting specific properties or variables or any other configuration parameters that we need to see after the deployment. For example, if you deploy a public IP, then if you want to know what is the DNS name or IP address that assigned to that public IP, then by using output, you can output into your console. Then variable.tf will use to define variables. So if you are using using the same parameter multiple times, then we highly recommend to use variables for multiple uses in your in your resource definition, right? So here now I will start to create my first resource in Terraform. So if you are working with Azure, you know that any resource that we deploy in Azure should be go under a resource group. So first thing what we need to do if you are working with Terraform and Azure, first thing we need to do is create a resource group. So to create a resource group, we have we need to use the we need to define the provider first, right? Before we create the resource group. So specifying a provider can be done in the main.tf, or you can create a separate file for provider and provider as provider.tf, then you can define in there. But for simplicity, I will use the main.tf to specify the provider as well. So we'll go to the our Terraform documentation, then we see how we can specify a provider. So we'll search for Terraform Azure provider. Then we'll go to the Azure RM provider documentation. In here, you can find the sample configurations that we can use for our provider. So this is the provider that we specify, and we from Terraform 1.0.12, of course, I think we can use Terraform code block as well. Here we are specifying what are the required providers that we need to use for this Terraform template. So I will copy all of these configurations, then I will paste it here. So if I explain this Terraform block in this main.tf. In the Terraform block, we are specifying a parameter called required providers. If you are using multiple providers, then you can specify these providers should be required to deploy your resources. So in my scenario, I am specifying my Azure RM provider as my required provider, and the source is come as hashcode/Azure RM. Then these providers has different versions. So because Microsoft and Terraform are working together to add new services and features into Terraform, so this version will be changing rapidly, right? So we have to pick a version here. So I'm specifying equal as version 3 as my provider version. So if you put equal in here, then it will stick to the version 3, even there is an update coming after that deploy. Right? So then we come to the provider section. So in this provider section, simply it's we are specifying the keyword provider, and we specify provider name, and we use features. If you are doing additional configuration features, then you can specify in the features section. Right. So now we specify the provider. Now we are good to create a resource group in Azure. So to create a resource in Terraform, we use the keyword resource. So if you type resource, then in my IntelliSense in WebStorm, it will show you the output. Then based on the provider, it will show you all of the resources that are available for that provider for your usage. So I will research for resource group. So then I will select the resource group. Right. Then after you specify the resource that you need to create, then here we need to put a value or name for that specific resource. This resource can be anything, right? Based on your requirement, you can name this resource group in any name. There are no mandatory way of defining this naming for the resource, logical naming, right? So, but I use underscores for dividing the namings of these resources. For example, here I will specify demo underscore RG. So then I know that this resource group is using for demo purposes. So I can easily identify the type purpose of this resource group. Then you have to specify the location and the name of your resource group. So these parameters can be hard-coded, right? That means you can literally type Southeast Asia and for name RG demo, right? This is totally fine, right? You can do it. Terraform accept it, and you can deploy it as well. But when it comes to the long-term maintainability, this will be a little bit hard to manage, right? So therefore, what we use is variables, right? So here also, I will show you how to use those variables for creating your first Terraform file, right? So what I'll do is I will remove this region section. Then we are using var to refer a variable in Terraform. Right? Then dot, then we refer the variable name. So I will name this variable as resource group, location. So then my code editor will show that this variable is not defined yet. So I will copy the name, then I will go to the variables file. Then to define a variable, then you have to use a variable keyword. Then give a variable name. Then you have to give the type. It's not mandatory to give the type because Terraform identify the type based on the value, but it's good practice to always define the type. So I will give the type as string, then description. Providing description is very important. So whoever check this command, this configuration file will understand what this variable used for. So we'll put a description as Azure region to be deployed. Okay, so we'll define our first variable as region. Then there's a default option. So by using default, we can specify our default value for this location. That means if you didn't specify a variable in the when you are deploying the Terraform, then it will use this default value. So I will show you how to pass values into this Terraform file at the end. So for now, we'll put a default value, say Southeast Asia. Okay. So now we'll define our second variable as well. var.rg name. Then I will copy the variable name. Then I will define the variable. Type string. Then I put a description. Resource group name. Then the default value. RG demo. Okay. Now we've created a resource group. We'll put a comment here. Create resource group. Then I will create a public storage account. Okay. Now we'll use the same approach. We'll use resource keyword. Then we'll search for storage account. Right. So we'll select the resource. Then we'll give a logical name for referencing the reference to this resource. We'll see input storage account. Right. Then there are some mandatory values you need to specify for this storage account application type, account tier, location, those kind of stuff. So some values you can hardcode, that's depend on your requirements. So you can make those values as variables, as I previously mentioned. But it depends on your requirement. Right? So first we'll go to the our documentation, Terraform documentation, and see what are the available values for these parameters. Right? Okay. We'll search for storage account. resource. Yeah, this is the. So in the example, you can see we need to give a name, then the resource group name, then the location, then the county, and the replication type. So the replication type is the first parameter in my case. So I will see what are the available parameters, right? So if you go to the documentation, it is required parameter, and you can see what are the available valid options that are available for you to pass to these parameters, right? So here LRS, GRS, and different application types. If you're familiar with Azure, you know what is local redundant storage, geo-redundant storage, likewise. So in my case, I will use LRS for local redundant storage. Then you have to specify count tier. So in the count tier section, you can see it's optional, but it's good to mention those stuff. So I will select storage version 2. This is the newest version and recommended option. Then another parameter that we need to give is location. So here what we are going to do is we are not hard coding the value here. We are using the variables. Then we'll for location. Then name, here I will hard code the naming, but this can be dynamically or randomly generated, or based on of your naming convention you can generate it. So those are a little bit advanced concepts by using Terraform functions. You can create your own unique name for storage account, because in Azure storage account should be unique. So in here I will hard code the and I will give a random name at the end. Right? So here we need to specify our resource group. So what we are going to do is we are not going to hard code the resource group value name here. We refer our resource group resource, and we'll get the property of that resource group, the name property of that resource group resource to reference the resource group name. So you can do it by referring that specific resource, then accessing the resource logical name, then the available attributes for that specific resource. So here you can see it will the resource Azure resource group resource will have multiple attributes you can use. So for this parameter we need the resource group name. So therefore I will check for the name, then I will put the name attribute here. So when the Terraform is planning and applying, it will refer the resource group name from the resource group resource. Okay. Now we create our two resources that we require for us. Now we see how to deploy this storage account and resource group into the Azure. So you are wondering how Terraform will authenticate with Microsoft Azure. Right? There are multiple ways you can authenticate with Microsoft Azure when you are deploying Terraform into the Azure. One option is using the SPN, search principal name. So that's the recommended way if you are using CI/CD pipelines or any other automations. Then if you are already signed in to the Azure by using Azure CLI, then Terraform automatically take that credentials session and use that for deploying the authenticate with Azure. And another method is using certificates as well. So you can see the authentication methods, right, in the Terraform documentation. Here, under the authentication to Azure, you can use CLI, then manage identities, then service principals, and service principal with secrets and service principals with certificate. Those are the 4 options that you are available for authenticating with Azure. So based on your scenario, you can select one of these 4 authentication methods. So in my case, I already log in with Azure CLI, so I will stick to that. Then as a first step, what you need to do is you need to initialize Terraform, right? So by making initialization Terraform, it will download the provider and required tools for provisioning the resource to Azure. So first we'll run Terraform init. So this, okay, there's an error. Let's see what is the error. Okay, so I specify codes. That's a error. So we'll remove codes here. Yeah. That's the whole method. So if there are any errors or any stuff, then initialization will be failed. So I will init it. So you can see it is downloading the required provider version and installing the provider for you. Okay, now you can see the message that Terraform has been successfully initialized. That means it will download the provider required version, required Azure RM provider with a specific version that I requested. Then now we are good to deploy it to Azure. So before we deploy in Azure to Azure, what we can do for Terraform is we can run a dry run and see what are the resources we are going to deploy. So for that, we need to run Terraform Plan. So we'll run Terraform Plan. So this will go through the configuration file. If there are any errors, it will show you. So here you can see there's an error. Okay, count here. I need to specify the standard or premium. So that's the mistake I have done. The count kind will be the storage. So we will specify that as well because it is important. Right. So we'll go to the documentation and see. Yeah, type is standard. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, count kind is storage version 1. To specify version 1. By default, it will be version 2. So anyway, so if you didn't specify that parameter, it will use the default value. Then you have access to here, so you can specify auto code. So I will specify auto. So to format this, I will use Terraform format file, or you can type Terraform FMT to format your Terraform files. So I run the Terraform plan again, then it will go and see the current state and desired state of our resource, and it will give you the output and what happened. So in this case, it will give you the output, right? So you can see plus means create, and if you have any destroys, it will show you minus, and changes, it will show you in tilde. So you can see this is the first time I'm going to deploy these resources. So therefore, all of the resources has to be created because our existing existing state is doesn't match with the desired state. So our existing state is nothing. So our desired state is have to create a resource group and storage account. So to make our desired state, then I need to create two resources, right? So at the end, you can see plan summary. So it's saying 2 to create, add, and 0 to change, and 0 to destroy. So that means it will create two resources. So now I can run apply. So I will run apply. So this will now go and deploy the resources into your cloud platform. In my case, it is Azure. So when you do the apply, you will go through the plan again. Then it will ask you to verify the action. So the only value that accepted for the approval is yes. If you type any other values, it will be discarded. Right? The apply will be discarded. So go through the plan again and see if everything is good. Then you can type yes. Then Terraform will go and deploy the resource into the cloud. So first it will create a resource group because to create a storage account, we need to have this resource group. So it will Terraform automatically identify the dependent resources, or we can specify the dependent resources as well. But Terraform is good at identifying the dependent resources. So now the resource group is created. Now the storage account is also created. Right. So now we can verify those resources are created in Azure. We can go to our Azure portal, then go to our resource groups. Then we'll search for demo RG. Then you can search RG demo. Then you can see the resource group is created and the storage account also created in that specific region that we specify, and the name and the storage kind also correct, right? So whatever the parameters that we pass will be all applied to the storage account. Okay, now we can use destroy command to destroy the entire stack, entire deployment that we done. But when you're doing it in production environment, be careful, because when you not destroy, you will go and destroy all of your resources at once, right? So for testing or any staging environments, you can destroy. So for that one, you can use Terraform Destroy command. So it will go and check the existing environment in the cloud, and it will identify what other resources you are going to destroy, and will give you the output what other resources going to deploy. So you can see it will give output and say these items are destroying. So and ask for verification. So if you type yes, it will go and start destroying the resources. Okay, now the destroy is completed, so we can verify by logging into the portal, right? If you refresh the resource groups, you can see the demo, RG demo is not available now because it is destroyed from Terraform commands. Yes, that's all for starting our first Terraform file. So in coming videos, I will give in an advanced way of authoring Terraform. So and different files, what those files mean. For example, here you can see Terraform TF state file, then the Terraform doc.cl, then there's another folder called Terraform. So we'll discuss those files in detail, why they are creating. So we'll discuss those in detail in future videos. So this is a very quick overview of creating your first Terraform file in Terraform resource in Azure. So I hope you guys enjoyed. So see you all in the next video. Thank you.